This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
It was home-cooked meals, for groups, so we could feast together on the farm and people could understand what regenerative agriculture was all about, and why people should be buying it and why people should be supporting local farmers.
This is The Producers. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Levenvale Farm is a place that nourishes the soil, the plants, the animals, and where farmer Georgina Baker and her husband Sam are rearing the amazing cattle to produce grass-fed Bello Beef. A farm that helps build community and bring back localised food systems too.
So we're in Bello, which is near Coffs Harbour, about 30 minutes inland from Coffs Harbour, on a organic beef farm. 500 acres of land about 5k north of Bello in a little catchment called Hydes Creek. We came from out west, and so we were sort of chasing a bit of rainfall. That's all we were chasing. We didn't realise that Bello was a touristy town, and what we found was this rundown old dairy farm, and that's what appealed to us: some rainfall and some upside in what we could achieve with some different grazing management. But what we have identified that Bello is a great region for is for the the opportunity and stuff. It's a epicenter of health and wellness and some alternative thinking, I suppose. And we arrived and have started renovating lots of the infrastructure. The first thing we did was rip out the old dairy because we're not doing dairy cattle, and so we sort of repurposed the old dairy into our cattle yards, and then we've gone ahead and put fencing up on the property, re-fenced a lot of the external boundary fences that were falling down, and broken up paddocks into smaller paddocks so we could graze in higher intensity and implement some of the regenerative agricultural principles that we're, subscribed to, and fencing off some of the creek and revegetating some of the creek areas and running more water troughs and improving pastures. So we've improved pastures by seeding some multi-species to try and get, other root matter and other species into the pastures. We've spread compost, and we do lots of trials and planting trees and and repurposing old infrastructure from the dairy. We proceeded to renovate an old barn and repurpose some old calf pens and sheds into another section of the farm that's run by another business. We under our same certification. We sublet out an acre into some people, friends of ours that grow veggies and run chickens out on our pasture. So they run their business on our farm. And so, once we undertook all the reno, I suppose we grow organic beef. So we've got 130 cows and calves, and we've got about 50 or 60 head of a mob of cattle that are, ready for slaughter.
A former musician, Georgina had to make some readjustments when stepping into farm life.
So I myself was, I'm from the city, I'm from Brisbane, and I was working in the music industry for a long while, and then And then I sort of changed industry, did similar work, just in working in an office in construction. And then I met Sam, and he was he's a farmer, and I moved out 4 hours west of Brisbane and lived out there on their property for, close to 10 years on a conventional grain cropping farm. And they had some cattle, 6,000 acres, and so I was just thrown into farm life, really. Coming from a fairly productive and system efficiency type system, work, and going out to farming, the first few years was like I identified that they do a lot of rework, and there's a lot of just one Easter I was out there and there was a leaking trough, and so hours and hours are spent digging to find the leak in the trough, just for me to realise, go over to the trough, at the end of the day and say, why didn't you just turn this tap off? But farmers have a lot of patience. I think that it probably isn't. So their systems maybe, I don't know, I'm not speaking for all farmers. I'm only speaking for the one that I hung around a lot. He's pretty patient, and there's a fair bit of rework that goes on. And I think it's interesting that there's not more frustrated farmers out there. But they're out there doing it, right? Loving it. They all love it. They all love their job more than a lot of other people. So keeps them happy, I suppose.
Georgina places more importance on the impact on the environment and lifestyle of the cattle than she does on the specific breed.
The breed. So we're not really into educated around or running any kind of genetic cattle per se. I mean, when we first, up in Mooney, where we lived, we were trading cattle. So we had a trading operation. We'd buy and fatten and sell. And certainly the markets that you're selling into are dictated by some level of breed code. And so Angus have got a premium and have done for several years. So we probably came down here, and when we bought some breeders, we would preference something with some Angus in it. And we buy Angus stud bulls, but we're certainly not, our breeders aren't some kind of genetic perfection. They were just trade cattle that we were just acquiring to build up a mob, a herd. And then now we're a few years into it, and now we're doing more with the beef side of it. I suppose we're getting more interested in what genetics can play in that kind of thing. But I'm certainly coming at it from an angle that I think that the taste of the beef and the product that we create is more dictated to by the pasture that they're eating and the way that they're treated. I think that has a bigger impact, but that's controversial because people that are in the world of genetics and cattle will argue with me, and I'm not educated enough to say otherwise. I'm just sort of speaking from a very much experience where we've, grown a Wagyu, we've grown a Hereford and taken the skins off and having a look at them, marbling. It's, learning. I'm learning all the time, but it's an area that I'm interested in learning a lot more about. What we do, how we run the cattle here is we run them all in one mob. So, they're all pretty close. And then we have 40 or 50 paddocks, and we rotate them around, and they often only have a day or less than a day in a paddock. And so what that does is, herd impact. So there's lots of manure and there's lots of hoof action, and then there's lots of times for those plants to recover in the time that they're spending. So we run between probably 20 to 50 or 60 days rest, depending on the season. And so the cattle are eating fresh pasture every day. So they're eating, the ice cream plants and what they really want to eat. And what we're trying to do when these paddocks are resting is we're allowing new species to grow. They're being given the opportunity to So we've got, 15 or 16 species in some of these paddocks, and that offers the cattle a wider range of nutrition, basically. And so whilst we're trying to do that, they're happy. They like to be in a large mob, and they like to, go onto fresh pasture every day. And we're not putting out any synthetic fertilisers to help the growth. We see that the rest is super powerful and in the system, and the seeds are all in the ground, and it's really just giving the seeds and giving whatever species the opportunity to grow, and we don't, and so we're not killing any plants, any weeds, as they call them, that come. Particularly here on the coast, we see them being very successional. They come and they go again, and what they do is fix a deficiency in the soil, and that it's become very obvious here. Like some really deep tap-rooted weeds will come, and and then they'll be gone, and they'll break down, and so that's that's what the cattle are eating, and that's how they're treated, and and we're farming much more. It's beneficial for everyone and everything. I think the way that we not having to put any inputs into the ground.
To begin with, Georgina reached out to the local community, and things took off from there.
When we came from out west, we were always doing sort of home kill cattle for our own consumption, and so it was never anything I even considered doing. And then we came to the coast, and we all of a sudden had these in conversion organic cattle. And I thought it's such a waste to be just selling them into the majority market, the main market that exists is into feedlots, and then they get grain finished and into supermarkets. And I kind of felt disappointed that there wasn't another opportunity for our cattle to go into, being 100% grass fed and grass finished, and so I just sort of tried to find whether or not butchers wanted to buy it, or and I couldn't find anyone that was as competitive as the feedlots, and so that's where we were selling all of our weaners into, and we were pulling off the odd one for our own consumption, and I just put it out to the local, 10 or 15 neighbours, if anyone was interested in buying some, and a couple of neighbours took us up on it, and so a local butcher cut some up for us, and I never really envisaged that it would become the way it did. And what I did was speak to them and start to understand that, no one wanted a half beast anymore, and no one wanted a quarter. And so we just got smaller and smaller with our offering. And, and along the way I got some, I did a course with Farmers to Founders, and they sort of have guided me along in how to enter this retail world, because it's a completely different world to agriculture. So there's been a lot of learnings and trying, navigating and changing and evolving along the way to try and get our meat used better. Like it's much more rewarding feeding your community than it is putting them all on the back of a truck, but it's not easy. We're still really just in Bellingen and locally around Coffs Harbour. There's a few stores that we're starting to sell it into down in some health food stores that are taking some of our sausages. We make, our sausages are probably a more unique product because we have, there's lots of red meat. There's not lots, but there's other brands, but our sausages are, they're fresh vegetables and herbs that are added just to beef. So there's nothing else in them, and we have a few different flavours. So we sort of package those up at the butcher, and they get dispatched to a few health food stores down to Port Macquarie and up, only probably as far as north of Coffs, and then we do some home delivery via another organic business, and they just sort of do home delivery around the Coffs coast. And then we've got a couple of shops in Bellingen that stock a health food shop that's been stocking our product, and a few restaurants now. We're providing into a few Bello restaurants. So Bellingen Restaurants is buying some Bello Beef cuts and putting them on the specials menu, which is great.
Now they have the support of the local chefs and restaurants too.
Going into restaurants, I think, has probably been one of the career highlights. Like, we had a festival of Bello Beef in January, and 10 restaurants and food truck or, food service providers took our beef and highlighted it for a 2-week period on their menus. And so getting around and eating it by, when chefs have prepared it is like, it's just, it's a moment that it's all the vision has come together and it's all, it's fantastic. And similarly on the farm, we started doing this series of events, paddock to plate dining events, so where we get people onto the farm to eat our product. And having some, we were doing it for a long time. I was doing it in my kitchen for a long time, and it was not 5-star, but it was home cooked meals, for groups, so we could feast together on the farm and people could understand what regenerative agriculture was all about, and why people should be buying it and why people should be supporting local farmers. And that was great. But after a year and, once we went over the threshold of what I could prepare in my kitchen, and then we got some chefs involved, and that was another moment where I thought, this is great. Like, it's awesome. It makes me very fulfilled to see our produce being given the credit that it's due, with the skills of a chef and someone that knows how to cook nose to tail.
Wanting to ensure they use every part of the cow, Georgina has created a range of value-add products. What
I saw happening when we started doing it was, I was looking at lots of things. When you pick up the meat and you know that you've dropped off that you've weighed a 450 kilo beast, right? And you turn up and there's 10 boxes. It's like, what's going on? So obviously half of it goes at the abattoir, and then it's like, where's the rest of it? And so then I just started speaking. I had a great relationship with this butcher, and he'd be like, well, there's 2 wheelie bins out the back full of this stuff. And I was like, well, what's that stuff good for? Like, why aren't we using all this? And so that's when I started, delving into what we could do with all this stuff that was in the wheelie bins, just going into landfill or whatever it was going. It was like, and the fat was a big one. And so we started taking all the fat back and making tallow, and we started taking all the bones and making broth. And all of the offal products, which would, otherwise be turned into dog food, or I wanted it all so that I could get it into my kids. So we started making pate, and we put the kidney into one of our sausages, and then we put the heart into one of our minces, so that people were getting the nutrition of the offal into a product without the ickiness or the not knowing what to do with it and how to get it into them. Liver's the single most nutritious food on the planet, grass-fed beef liver. It's like no one wants to eat it fried up with onions. I mean, I do, but no one else in my family does. So I started making pate, and and so those things, the broth gets rid of, like, there's a 30% of the carcass sometimes, is bones. And so it's a huge amount of bones to deal with and to process, and I don't want them to be wasted because I know what goodness can come out of them. So we started making broth and selling broth, and that was really popular. And so I found a broth manufacturer up, and they've sort of commercialised that range. And we want to do the same thing with the tallow and the pate.
Having built an incredible model for a farm, they've built the foundation to take it anywhere from here.
Well, I'm a bit of a person that likes to have new ideas all the time. And right now, this is a canvas of like unlimited opportunity. So we came here with this plan to renovate an old dairy farm and then move back out west in 2 years' time. And after 2 years, it was like, oh, we might just stretch that out to 3 years. And now it's been 4 and we're not going to move back out west. We're going to stay here, but it's like, I don't know how long that piece of string is. You know, I never thought that we would share this farm with veggie growers, and I never thought that we would have a barn where we host events, and I never thought that we'd start farm stay accommodation. And we now have, 3 accommodation offerings on the farm where and guests can come, and there's a communal shared kitchen and a couple of outdoor showers. But again, it's all sort of grown quite organically with like what we're doing. Just get people to learn about what's going on and where their food comes from and how powerful food is and why we should be paying more attention to what we're putting in our mouth and, health. Pretty passionate about health, human health, and that just comes from, experience and trying to fix health in my own family. And it's like how we all become so oblivious to the fact that, so what's the best part about living on the farm? It's that we're growing our own super nutritious food, and I know where it's coming from, and I have an abundance of it, and I can access it whenever I want it. And, that's the best thing about living here.
At Levenvale Farm, Georgina and Sam have found a recipe to not only feed the local community with quality organic Bello beef, but they've created a model that nourishes the soil and uses every last bit of the beast too. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of producers, farmers, makers and growers, the true lifeblood of the food industry. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or email us at producerspodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au.